COVID-19 has revealed the fragility of the world's food security levels, pushing millions of people further below their country's respective food poverty lines, including South Africa. And now let's discuss this. We're joined by Alef Meulenberg, the Chief Executive Officer of Afrika Tikkun, to speak more on this. A very good afternoon to you, sir. Thank you so very much for once again joining us here on SABC News.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. You know, today we celebrate Human Rights Day against the backdrop of many issues that do, in fact, ironically affect human rights. One of them being what we're talking about now, which is food insecurity. Now, there are many issues that then contribute to the issue of food insecurity, and I'd like us to discuss those. Of course, it would be disingenuous of us to discuss them without also then talking about the most recent one, which is COVID-19. One can imagine that this has actually just made things worse.
It definitely has, and I think one of the main components of food insecurity, as mentioned in previous slots on the news channel here, is unemployment and poverty. And unemployment and poverty often go hand in hand with what is deemed to be food insecurity currently. And this has been exacerbated by COVID-19, where a lot more people, particularly also during the first lockdown, lost access to income and therefore immediately lost access to food. And when nothing comes in the hand instead of rands, immediately people suffered when it comes to having access to not just food on its own, but nutritional food. Yeah. And that has been something that we have been, as Afrika Tikkun, have been intimately involved with during the first wave, and particularly also with another organization that was mentioned, Gift of the Givers, and currently are looking at solutions as how can we sustainably address this issue. And our solution in that is more around agripreneurship, which is an entrepreneurial program in the agriculture space, but at the same time looking at the immediate need through food parcels. So it's definitely gotten worse through COVID, but it was not an issue. It was already an issue before. It just has gotten a lot worse.
Yeah. You know, when you talk about accessing nutritional food, it just seems to me that, you know, all issues also have sub-issues. So, yes, we're dealing with the issue of food insecurity, but we're also then on the back of it dealing with, you know, whether or not where there is food, if it is nutritional food. And I'm wondering how we can really deal with with all these factors sort of combined. I mean, maybe we can have a discussion on that. You're also talking about the fact that, you know, the issue of food parcels, which is really fantastic. But I'm one to think that, you know, people should be taught how to fish as opposed to, you know, being handed or given the fish, because then it becomes a little bit more sustainable. And I wonder if this is something that, you know, is a huge talking point or a huge conversation around the issue of food insecurity.
It is indeed. And from an Afrika Tikkun perspective, our entire methodology is based around sustainability. So only giving food parcels was a solution that was only sustainable for a little while. So we have moved over again to holistic development, which goes from cradle to career. That's our slogan. Yeah. So we link everything together in a holistic methodology. And from a food security point of view, that means that people will have to have access to food on a sustainable basis, which means exactly the narrative that you use, teaching people how to fish rather than to giving them the fish themselves. Because if you give someone a fish today, they will be hungry again tomorrow. If you rather teach them how to produce food in the space that they have or in the community they're in, it will allow them to be able to teach the fish and to generate food for themselves. So for us, the issue is around inequality, it's around unemployment, it's around poverty, and directly a symptom of that is lack of access to food for those who are in both township and rural communities. And that's something that we're very passionate about dealing with on a daily basis. Sometimes successful, sometimes less successful, but we are very passionate about providing people with access to food that is sustainable and that's nutritious. Because if we don't give particularly also children access to nutritious food, it will lead to stunting. People will have a full stomach, but will not have the nutrition that's required to develop as a holistic human, and therefore will face developmental delays.
Yeah. Then I'd also, you know, we live in in a world where profits are obviously put in front of human lives, humanity, and that's, I suppose, something that we just, have to deal with. We have high food prices, and at the same time, the rise of poverty and the rise of people that are hungry, and there is a lot of food insecurity, obviously. And I always think, you are always going to make your profits anyway. You don't have to make the prices so high, because food is something people will always need to access. Why should you make the prices so incredibly high that so many in our country, so many in the world, cannot even live? And this is obviously a moral question I have for myself, and I'm throwing it at you like this. But, what are your thoughts really around that?
I think there are two aspects to this. The one aspect is I must commend some of the retailers during the first wave, because they gave us all food that we procured at cost price or sometimes below. But I agree with you. I think that what it leads to, for an Afrika Tikkun point of view, it leads us to focus on how do we develop local economies in townships, and how do we ensure that people in township communities can grow and sell food themselves. So that they have options, so they don't have to go to their local retailer, even though some of those retailers are our partners and give us food on a daily or weekly basis, but they can grow that food themselves. And for me, that would be the solution, is that they don't, because then if they have options, then they can go with a clear conscience either to one of the larger retailers from a food perspective, or they can grow it themselves and buy it from their own community. And for us, that's what local economic upliftment is about. Is to provide people with choices and to keep as much rand value in the community as possible.
All right. Alef, it's always a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much. No doubt we'll have further conversations on this topic in the future. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, and have a lovely Human Rights Day.
Same to you. All right. That's Alef Meulenberg, the Chief Executive Officer of Afrika Tikkun. All right. Let's